This is the Rock House Center podcast, and I'm John Murphy.
I'm Beth Murphy, and we're going to talk about today is what your child most needs to know about God. It's a direct follow-up to last week's podcast on breaking the code to your child's heart. We talked about how to be certain that your child is assured of your love, and then the need to have a whole separate track of communication that accomplishes that purpose in their life.
The aspect we want to talk about today is what your child needs to hear from you about God. Common condition of most children relative to their faith is that even though they have professed their faith, there is a lot more to it, and they have not yet reached that place where they are actually trusting in God, and they have a trusting relationship with God, and that's a really critical thing for them to have peace about life. It's also fairly common in adults as well, and so they really kind of reflect to some degree the normal Christian approach, which is to trust God for salvation, but not yet know Him and not really function in the love and the trustworthiness that He has to offer. And those are very important things for us to have peace about life. What we see frequently in our conversations with folks here is that they have trusted God for the issue of salvation, and they have a level of peace there. But God offers to take all the burdens of life. Parents and some of the children that we talk to are in a similar situation where they are not actually trusting God for more than salvation. And so they have basically a lot of the burdens of life are on them, and they're kind of on their own. They're isolated in trying to take these things on and solve these problems in their own strength. And so it's a really important aspect of the relationship that a parent has with their child to begin to introduce God as being available and loving them deeply to fill their deepest needs, and also to begin to trust Him for all of the burdens of life, which is what His offer is.
So the lack of this forms up the underpinnings of worry, fear, anxiety, depression, that sense of that I'm all alone in life and not able to really personally connect with God and trust Him and truly rest in Him in the way that He proposes and wants our faith to be. We want to just start with the beginning place here, with the fact that all children have a set of what we call divine needs. Those are deeply implanted needs that God's put in everyone's heart that can only be filled by God and in a trusting relationship with Him. It goes beyond, like parents will express to us at Rock House, that they're ready to go beyond telling their children Bible stories and having them have information about God and know things in the Old Testament, know about Jesus, but they want to help them connect personally, maybe even at a young age, with relating to God and knowing the character of God in the depth of their heart.
Another way to express it is that we provide a lot of information, so God is in their head, but God is not in their heart. And we need to get God down in their heart. And one of the reasons why is because that's where the need is. It's really clear in Ecclesiastes 3:11, where it is explained to us that there is a need which has been implanted in every person's heart and in their mind as well, it says. But there's nothing that satisfies that like God. And the only way for this to be satisfied is in knowing and trusting God. So that's why it's so important for the deepest needs of a child to be filled, or any person to be filled, is knowing the truth about who God is and then trusting Him to fill these empty places that can only be filled by God. If we don't turn to God, then we basically pursue things which are not divine, trying to fill a divine need.
So this desire for eternity, the connection with God, helping your child make that connection is really a privilege. It's a privilege that parents get to have, to make that introduction and connect their child at whatever age they see the opportunity to make that direct connect with God. I think of it kind of like plugging in a wall socket. It's not the head information where many adults, too, can check the correct answers based on what Scripture says on a true-false questionnaire, but they don't know it in the depth of their heart. And so the Scripture talks about having Jesus making it clear, I want the children to come to me and don't hinder them. And in the version in Luke, I believe it is, He's admonishing parents to not be a block to children coming to Him. Of course, we don't want to be that block. We want to figure out what's the way that we can facilitate that in the deepest kind of a way, and often in simple kinds of ways.
Yes, this is not a super high-level theological discussion. This has very specific, very clear applications to the quality of your child's life and the quality of the parenting experience. A great example, just to talk about it in really practical terms now, is the story of the father who was putting their child to bed. The child says, "Daddy, do you love me?" And he goes, "Yes, I love you." And then he gets about a yard away from the bed and trying to settle the child down, but the child pops up again, "But Daddy, do you love me?" And he goes, "Yes, I love you." And then this happens 2 more times before he gets out of the room, and he's answering yes every time in the affirmative. And then the guy turns the corners going down the hall, and it's still happening. And so people would look at that and go, "Well, that's just an incorrigible child. Doesn't believe me when I tell him what it is that when I tell him the truth." We have this sort of human interaction reaction. But what we need to understand is that there's a reason why that father's answer wasn't enough. Is because this was the beginning of a child looking for something deeper. What is happening, we feel like in that situation, is the child is beginning to sense that they have a level of need for a kind of love that they want to get from their parents, but the parents actually cannot satisfy that. So that divine need begins to bubble up. And so the answer to the question, if the father could have turned around and gone back to the child and said, "I love you as well as I can, being an imperfect parent, for as long as I'm going to be here, being mortal," sounds like you really need to hear about God, who will love you perfectly and who will love you eternally. And so this is the perspective that we have seen over and over again, where the parent goes, "This is kind of a crazy conversation, and why don't they listen to me? This doesn't make sense." Because there is this behind that activity or behind the behavior, there's a need that there isn't really a worldly answer to, there isn't a parent answer to, but there's still an emptiness, and that answer needs to come for them to really truly settle down.
So a beautiful example of that is a client, a dad who was coming to Rock House after a series of things that had resulted in their family being disrupted internally and in family relationships outside the family in the neighborhood. There was just a lot of disruption going on. And the parents were in the process of addressing their own hearts and changing and becoming more and more assuring to their children, more credible to their children, because the children are soaking up the changed version of mom and dad and the assurance about being loved and peaceful. But Dad's noticing that the youngest child still has a lot of anxiety and fear and is standing in his doorway at bedtime thinking about it's time to replace the batteries in the night lights and counting them and realizing there are 8 night lights in this child's room. And this child has a hard time ever sleeping on his own without his parents. And if he does sleep on his own, he's in a little heap in the covers at the foot of the bed. And just standing there asking God, this is Dad, standing in the doorway asking God, what do I say to reassure him? What popped into his mind were just the simple words that, you can always come to our room if you want to, but know that God and Jesus are always with you. They're always right here with you in your room or wherever you are. They're here with you even if we're not in the house or we're just down the hall. They're with you if you go to a friend's house. They're always with you. His version was, I think, way simpler than that, but that was the message that I remember that he communicated. The little boy just looked at him and did what a child does who's in a trusting relationship with their parents, which is she just went, "Okay, Daddy," and went to sleep. It wasn't as simple as just that statement that night about the night lights. It had been preceded by the assurance of being loved and protected and secure, and that Mom and Dad are there for you. But then, again, back to this helping the child plug into the wall to connect directly to God, that even though we're doing our very best for you, there is something more that you need, and it's God. Because I can't be there every minute of every day, but God is.
So in sort of a practical way of describing it also, it is that there is this eternal need, and that need can only be filled by the divine. And what happens is the eternal need hits the limitations of the world or the limitations of humanity to fill that need. Those are the opportunities that we have to say, okay, well, there is a divine solution. It's now time to talk about it. What we have seen through our experience, the most critical need they have is true unconditional love. And a lot of parents will say, well, I'm loving them unconditionally. But the reality is that you can't love unconditionally any more than you can as a human. True unconditional love is a divine thing. It's a perfect thing. There is literally no condition whatsoever. That's something that God offers. And that's a really critical piece, because everyone, including children, need to know that no matter how badly they've messed up, no matter what's wrong with their thinking, what's wrong with their room, what's wrong with their grades, that no matter what goes on, that there is an entity who knows everything about them and knows every mistake they've ever made and does nothing but love them back. We all need that, because there's a limit to how much we're willing to trust in people to love us. We're always kind of holding a certain amount of the reality of our lives back from others because we're afraid that maybe they would reject us if they really knew the full truth. Well, you can just sense inside of you that it is we all need to have this understanding that there is an entity who completely knows literally every detail of our lives and loves us completely. And that's the basis of a lot of assurance and a basic of a lot of worth, is that when someone loves you despite your behavior, that establishes a level of worth, and that my worth is not based on performance. So that's one of the critical ones, and it has to do with a lot of assurance about self-worth and self-identity. And then another big one is just a sense of purpose in life. The two things on the top of the list are peace about self, and then peace from the perspective of purpose, knowing knowing where I'm going in life. What's the significance of my life going to be? And really, both of those things are only available and can only be completely satisfied with trusting God for the answers of those things. And so we have this ability to, as we said, the privilege to begin to answer those questions. And we also need to understand that we don't have the answer to that question. We can't have the answer to that question because that's a divine answer. But we have this amazing opportunity to still fill the needs of our child by allowing God into the conversation and letting Him be the answer.
Just thinking as you're talking about Scripture that reveals that we have this core desire to be fully known and fully loved, which is what God describes that He does, just as you were saying. Our children just need what we need. So we as parents want to go first and kind of lead the way, connecting with God to know that I am fully known and fully loved by God, that He does have a plan and a purpose for my life, and there's peace in both of those things, even if you don't have specifics about what the plan or purpose is in a given season of your life. Just knowing that He's got the big picture taken care of, and it's going to unfold in the different times of your life. It's just that rock solid kind of foundation. Situations in life can bring up the need to know God's character as life hits, as the questions of life hit. And so they can happen early in life, or maybe not until later. We always talk with our clients about their earliest awareness of a deep aching longing, a deep divine need that parents couldn't feel, nobody could feel. It's fascinating the ways in which those things take shape. Sometimes people report very early awarenesses. Sometimes people don't really have one that they're aware of till they're 12 or they're 25. But the kinds of things that go through everybody's mind.
An example of that was my own, and it's a part of the workbook. I talk about this experience, but I remember being very young, walking back from the mailbox, and just having this recognition that I'm not eternal, that I'm mortal, that I'm going to die. And it was upsetting because there wasn't an answer for that. And so I went straight to my father to try to find out the answer. And he, being a doctor, gave me the sort of scientific, physiological, biological outcome of death. Obviously, that didn't solve the problem. I would probably say that made it worse. At that point, when I recognized I was mortal, I needed to actually be told that my spirit is eternal. And that's where my peace comes from, and that spirit is going to live with God, someone who loves me perfectly and will love me forever. I needed to hear that assurance at that time. And instead of that, and because I didn't have that assurance, it left a level of torment and anxiety and uncertainty, which my behaviors growing up were partly about trying to cover the loss of peace I had about that uncertainty and the idea that this was all just going to end up as a biological degrading back to dust sort of experience. That there was something in me that just could not be okay with that.
Children ask all kinds of these sorts of eternal questions, then they can begin to come to light or come into their minds when they see things going on in their friends' families. Maybe their friend's parent dies or their friend's parents divorce or something, and they start wondering, wonder what happens to me if that happens. What happens if you die or you go away? Can even get stirred up, a parent is going on a trip for a month and they've never been away before. And that can stir up the thought that, wait a minute, things can change here in life. I might have a parent gone for a while. What does that mean? Is this pulling the rug out from under me in life? And so Parents just want to recognize the significance of those kinds of questions, and even if their child appears to sort of get over it and move on, just to recognize that there's really an opportunity to speak into that with love and assurance and God's plan for our lives, regardless of whether the circumstances of life change.
So a couple of questions that we've heard coming through, which make a lot of sense, that these obviously are eternal questions. One of them is, what happens to me when you're gone? And that's a really clear one. I'm looking to you as my parent. I count on you for caring for me and leading me in life and giving me the things that I need to be okay and sustaining me, comforting me. You're the protector in my life. One of the questions that we've heard from through parents and sometimes directly from children is that question. What happens to me when you're gone? Well, that is an eternal question. Obviously, you don't have an answer. You can't tell them anything that answers that question and satisfies that need with what is within your, what you can credibly say about your ability to deal with that problem. That falls clearly into a category of an eternal question, because there is sort of this future. The future is uncertain when I consider the idea that you will not be a part of my life. So I need an answer that's bigger than you. So the kind of answer, and that's an opportunity. And in that situation, a parent can say, I'm going to take care of you as well as I can and love you as well as I can and direct you in life as well as I can for as long as I'm going to be here as an imperfect person. But you need to know that there is a God who is with you forever, who has promised to take care of you, and his Spirit will lead you no matter what comes, even if I'm not around. And they can roll into, so let's talk about trusting God in this, and let me tell you about who God is and how much he loves you. And someone who loves you that much is clearly going to nurture you and lead you and care for you in life. The fear about the parent being gone is understood in a very different way when the full context of their life, which includes a relationship with the Lord, is understood.
On the issue of purpose in life, there's a question that children and adults can ask, which is essentially, is this all there is? Whatever I can see on my horizon, is this all there is? Meaning, I'm not really connected directly to God, so I'm feeling kind of empty. So the earliest example of that I've had reported is a client who said that she sort of remembered this, but her parents vividly remembered when she was 4 or 5 years old and came home from daycare and plopped her little book bag down on the table and sighed loudly and said, okay, I got up this morning and we had breakfast and I went to daycare and now I'm home. We're going to do things around the house tonight and I'm going to go to bed. And then I'm going to get up tomorrow and do the same thing. Is that all there is to my life? Wow, right there, that's it. That's the heart's cry for a deeper sense of purpose, a purpose beyond what I can see in what I'm doing in my life and my horizon, or I can understand, and the need to know that God's the one who saw you before you were fully formed, created you with the purpose of knowing him personally, relating to him personally, him allowing you to be changed to have more of the character of Christ, and then the purpose or the meaning or the functions of your life unfolding as life goes on, and there'll be many different seasons of that, but that the deepest foundational need for purpose is set in motion, and the answer to it is, your deepest purpose is connecting directly to the God who loves you and created you and will always be with you.
Here's a situation I think a lot of parents can relate to, and this is a real one that's reported to us by an adult who it hit him when we talked about the eternal question. When did he start to feel like that something was missing? For him, it was Christmas. And he had all these packages that were under the tree. It was like Christmas afternoon, and he said he can remember vividly where the tree was. All the packages were open, and he was sitting there going, is this all there is to life? That's a great example. If you've ever experienced a child who's had a lot of excitement, who's looking forward to the things that come at Christmas, that's going to make their life really wonderful and joyous, and everything that they're expecting is all wrapped up in those things that are wrapped up under the tree. After Christmas, pretty quickly they're back to themselves. There even may be some disappointment. There actually might be a little bit of a cloud over them. And you wonder, now wait a minute, I gave this child everything they wanted for Christmas, or maybe significant things they wanted for Christmas. Why are they in this place of now they don't feel like, it's not like they're happy, but they got the gifts? Well, what happened is that they had an anticipation that these things under the tree were going to fill something deep inside of them, and life was going to be great and wonderful again in the way in which they think about it. But once they actually experienced what was under the tree, there was still an emptiness. And I experienced the same thing myself growing up. I can remember that as well. But this was a client who came in and brought this story in. And so you may have experienced that your child has a focus on something that they represent is really going to be a breakthrough for the way their life feels. And then they get it. And then all of a sudden, it's just not that big a deal because there was an expectation that something was going to be satisfied. And once the thing is realized, once the thing is obtained or achieved, then they kind of go, it's kind of empty.
And that's very familiar to adults too. Certainly clients and all of us have probably experienced some version of, maybe it's achieving a goal or an accolade or some sort of accomplishment, and then realizing shortly after. So someone recently just talked about becoming valedictorian and that it lasted for about 5 minutes. There's a lot goes into becoming a valedictorian, and the realization that even that wasn't enough and couldn't be enough because it can't possibly meet a deeply implanted divine need, because that need can only be satisfied by God himself. And so opportunities that present themselves in life, if you just think about life now, just the upsetting sorts of circumstances clearly outside our control or the child's control or the parent's control are things like riots and virus, the COVID thing, death, the loss of, say it's a grandparent or an aunt or the neighbor whose parent died, and suddenly the realization that people that you love can die and be gone. Those are big things in life that, again, a child may look like they kind of get over it and move on. But we want to recognize in the moment that this is really a wonderful parenting opportunity to give them your personal parental love and assurance, but also go ahead and do that thing of connecting them directly in the truth of what you know to be true about God and his love, protection, and his presence ever present in their lives.
Just a real quick phrase that helps people get the perspective is that when there is a problem which is bigger than you, then you need a God that's bigger than it to be at peace. You have to have a place you can go in the midst of something that's totally out of your control, where you can take refuge, where you can trust in that for your peace. Whenever you have a problem, you've got to have something bigger than the problem to have peace about the problem that you can trust in. And that's kind of a quick way of looking at as kids bump into these sort of big, and they will, and I'm sure many people have experienced the way in which a child reacts to something that the parent really can't control, and they're trying to console them, and they try to tell them why it's okay, and we bring them a lot of comfort, but it's limited to us and what we can tell them about what we can do or about situations or ways to rationalize it. They need a bigger answer.
So a problem develops for children when the parents are on what we call the God pedestal or in the God socket, in the place in the child's heart, because parents are in this role that's a unique place of divine authority, and they're representing God. We call parents the gods of our youth because that's how God set it up. He's intended for parents to be an ambassador for him and to represent him. And they start their lives with total dependency, of course, for all of their needs, and looking to parents as the answer for everything. They're the people with the answers. They run the world and the planet. But what happens is, over time, of course, everyone comes into the awareness that their parents are flawed in some way. In other words, they come off the God pedestal. And maybe a child, as they get older, views their parents as hypocritical or unsatisfactory. Just they're not getting it done. They're not meeting my needs.
Well, they just don't have the answer to the thing that I want.
Right. They truly don't have the answer. And so in that inevitable sort of discontent, it comes from a child looking to parents to fill their deep divine needs, going all the way back to that example that you gave about the little girl saying, "Daddy, do you love me?" No amount of assurance. He said it every different way he could think of, but no amount of assurance was enough because she needed the assurance of God's love. We can preempt the level of discontent that can come later in life for a child by just recognizing these things earlier on. They may have had a confession of faith. They may know a lot about Jesus. They may have a lot of Bible stories in their minds or information in their minds, but not have that direct connection or relationship. And so the good news is that parents have a tremendous amount of credibility with children, certainly when they're young. I mean, they're just like open little flowers. I just envision, open child, watering can, you just pour into them. Whatever you're pouring into them, they're going to soak it up. But even what we see to be true consistently is that children, quote unquote, can be in their late teens, 20s, they can be in their 30s. We have had parenting clients where their children were adults, but the parents were recognizing that they're the ones that could have an influence on their child's life because of, even if they live in different states, they have a place of divine authority in their child's life. And so the recognition of that and the understanding that, wow, this is a real opportunity. This is an opportunity for me as a parent to demonstrate things that are foundational to the character of God.
So it's not only speaking directly into and explaining, but there's also the demonstration piece. To the extent that we can relate to and function in the truth of who God is and testify to his will through actually how we run our lives. When we have loss of peace, do we pray? Are we looking for God for the answers to our own personal divine needs? Do we express a assurance about a situation because of trusting in God for it? Those things are really critical. So not only is it just speaking in and having to find, you don't have to find the right moment. You can just live it out. Children are constantly looking at the gods of their youth to understand how the world works and how they satisfy their own needs and what's valuable and what's important. So as parents live this trust in God out in front of them, that's also a significant communication, and the child is definitely going to be taking that in as well.
So an interesting example, a story of a boy who, he was telling this later in life, but he was talking about when he was about 12, I guess. It was a scene where there's a snowstorm. He and his friend are picked up by the friend's mom from school. One of these crazy things that sometimes can happen in Middle Tennessee where it's very hilly and the roads get icy, and a 20-minute drive home back from school. Snowstorm that came up suddenly. That 20-minute drive took about 4.5 hours. Throughout that time, the friend's mom was driving along talking out loud to God all the time. Just, okay, do we go straight through this red light so that we don't skid and hit that car? Or all right, now, how do we take this hill? Okay, now. And just the whole 4.5 hours was weaving through all of that, just listening to God. And it was a peaceful 4.5 hours. And driving through the midst of cars that are all going off the side of the road in the ditch, and all kinds of things are happening. It was just interesting that there's a lot to notice in that. The child's takeaway was seeing what it meant in a practical way to truly depend on God.
Another aspect of this is just keeping in mind that a lot of the strife and disappointment in the relationship that parents may have with their children could be around this. You don't have to worry about understanding and interpreting everything a child says and trying to worry about whether or not that's a eternal question or what. I mean, you basically can start this at any age. You don't have to find the particular line, but the sooner in which we begin to help the child move the information from their head to their heart and recognize God as an entity that loves them and they can trust in early on, then it just becomes part of the culture of the family. Frustrations don't get experienced because the answer is already there.
So a way to look at this is even to think about things that are challenging or difficult or irritating in parenting. If you begin to look at it as, oh wait, now this is a symptom of something, and this is maybe an opportunity that I could speak into here. So examples of that kind of thing are when a child of any age is inconsolable about something, or they talk about, if they're older and they're using words like devastating. The boyfriend-girlfriend breakup was devastating. What those people said to me at lunch in the cafeteria at school crushed me. So that's a recognition that something deep has been hit there. And rather than talking them out of why the boyfriend was a bad actor anyway and don't really want him in your life, and those kids at lunch really probably didn't mean what they said, instead of that, which we may all tend to do, just to really start hearing, what are they expressing? And what's the divine need that they're yearning for here? What is the assurance that they need to know about that God loves them, their value, their worth, that life isn't really riding on someone else's approval or acceptance, that God loves them with no risk of rejection, and that they are perfectly loved and adored and comforted and protected, and these other people, these external things aren't the indication of that.
I think another quick way of thinking about this is when your child exhibits behavior that doesn't make sense to you, you have to understand that it probably makes sense to them. And so your challenge is to figure out why it makes sense to them and then bring in the answer. That's how we're going to solve this problem. So many times we've heard bewildered parents about the behavior of their children, and they've tried to do what they can to control the behavior, control the attitude, or whatever it is. And one of the things that we open up for them is this opportunity to understand that that might make sense to them. Consider that actually there's a rational basis for that. And look into, well, if you consider the divine needs every child has, and you consider how it is that they're doing life and that that's not filling that need, then that would make sense that they're wildly frustrated when really seemingly insignificant things happen to them.
And that applies at all ages. Just thinking about now as a grandparent, watching a son and daughter-in-law deal with a 2-year-old, and the way of expressing love that comes out of they're just having an understanding perspective of what life feels like to a 2-year-old. And so they're addressing things, they're dealing with things that need to be dealt with in the way they need to be dealt with all across the spectrum. But it comes from, rather than being bewildered by, some obviously irrational seeming responses to things, they're seeing it for what it means from a 2-year-old and then speaking to that child's heart and that child's need. And as children get older and they do things like extreme things, they have what we call, they're obsessing on things. We call it an air hose. In other words, they're acting like this thing, their video game, their electronics, their friend group is foundational to their existence in life, and without them, they don't know if they can go on. All right. So it can be, distressing or irritating, however you happen to feel on a given day. But what you want to be able to do is just begin to, just what you said, just look at it for, why is this making sense to them? If the parent restricts or pulls away video games and the child runs away and leaves a suicide note, okay, that's a real example. And so what we want to do is get at the why. Obviously, all the trying to control of behaviors has done nothing but ramp it up and make it worse, because we got to get to what's going on in their heart and understanding what is the divine need, what's the deficit there that we want to address and fill.
I just feel like I have to say it again. If you observe behavior that makes absolutely no rational sense to you, you have to understand that if you lived their life, if you were exactly where they were, if you experienced everything they experienced, if you were experiencing the needs they were, experiencing their culture, their family, experiencing their friends, experiencing their school, if you saw it from their experience, it actually probably makes perfect sense. Well, the great thing about all this is that we're not alone in parenting our children. Obviously, the model we talked about last time, that we want to try to parent our children as God parents us, and that's a place of unconditional love and acceptance. The next level of this is, okay, how do I partner with God in this? And we've alluded to it a little bit earlier, but it's important to understand that you are not alone. You have a limitation based on who you are and your experiences and your beliefs and all your things. There's a limit to how much a parent can actually solve and parent in a way that is similar to God. We are not divine. We're not going to get there. So there's a limit to how closely we can reflect God's character because we're people. But the great thing is that God backfills from there. He can take it whatever limit we have, whatever limit the child may be frustrated because they're experiencing it. That is the time to understand that the total answer and the success of your child's life is going to be based on you doing the best you can as a parent and making sure to introduce God to be right behind you and backfilling for everything else they need. There's a level at which they can trust you to do those things as well as you can, and then for whatever ththings where because of your story you're at your limit, we introduce them to God, and then God fills the rest of their need. And to me, I just love the way that takes the load off. You get in this situation where there can be anger and frustration and conflict back and forth between parents and children. There can be a lot of sense of burden of, how am I going to solve this problem? It's on me to solve this thing. And actually the reality of it is that you're not alone, but you still get to be the answer. So you have this amazing opportunity to partner with God to fill every need your child has. So you still get to be the answer. You still get the privilege of seeing the child's life be peaceful and fulfilled and go the right direction because they have trusted you to the level at which you are able to fill their needs, and then they move into the trust of trusting God for the rest, and then they are fulfilled people. They have their deepest needs satisfied. And that's a wonderful thing to be able to recognize, that you still get to have the answer, but the answer is God.
One of the most beautiful things that we see in working with parents here at Rock House is they may be in the midst of an embroiled parent teenager conflict, just to watch that unwind, not because we're meeting with the teenager. We may meet with them once. We're meeting with parents and helping the parents understand what's going on in their own heart and what's going on in their child's heart. The result of that is that parents change and they shift and the relationship shifts. And fascinatingly, also with younger children, they can preempt that whole season that is assumed in our culture is unavoidable. That teenagers are going to rebel. There's going to be all this strife in the family. It's miserable. People just kind of roll their eyes and go, well, I have a teenager at home, and you know how bad that can be. Well, what we see is that, no, actually, it doesn't have to be like that and isn't like that as relationships turn around and parents are more and more able to rest in God and trust in God themselves, begin to translate differently. It's back to breaking the code in their child's heart, helping the child break the code in the parent's heart, and all of the dynamic begins to change. And again, really cool that as parents are doing this when their children are younger, then they find that they can preempt that entire negative season as the child gets older.
So we just want to say that it does happen later in life as well. If someone's a teenager or maybe early college kind of age, we have seen so many scenarios where there's this isolation and this separation, and it turns into the child showing up at family chores, more engaged with what's happening, investing more in the family and doing the things which allow the family to prosper and succeed. They go from not wanting to be around, staying in their own room, to coming and sitting down beside dad and just wanting to talk. I mean, it's really almost miraculous the way, and certainly feels miraculous from the perspective of the parent, when this behavior starts shifting, and all they have done is to partner with God.
So parents can speak truth to their children and have it stick because of the weight that parents carry. That's put in place by God's design, that parents are in this role of divine authority as ambassadors, representatives of God. At any age, a parent has a level of importance and credibility with their child, even in an estranged relationship, and they want and need the acceptance of their parents, the approval of their parents, and the sense that their parents love them even if they mess up.
Yeah, and I think that no matter what age, I can tell there's still something they want to hear from their parent. They still want that message of whatever it is that's going to fill that empty thing inside of them. And it can be everywhere from, do you realize how much I love you, to do you realize how much God loves you and he's been with you your whole life. I mean, even kids who are in their 60s, you can talk to them and you say, I never heard this. And so it's still available to be healed. And so you don't ever give up on the opportunity to bring the answer to your children. There are two assurances that where we're partnering with God that are so important, that if you just wrote these down and went and tried to work this into a conversation with your children, it's going to make a huge difference. And the first one has to do with love. And so here's an example of how to communicate what it is, and you put it in your own words, but how to communicate what it is that your child needs to hear. And it is, I love you as well as I can, for as long as I'm here to love you. But don't worry, because God's love is divinely unconditional, perfect, and eternal. Put whatever words around that you want, but that is a message that your children need to hear. And that has to do with the unconditional love aspect, which is on the top of the list of what every human being and every child needs to hear. And on another one that's really important, and here's one you can put in your own words as well, but this is another way to express assurance from God, and really is basically a partnering statement that we're going to partner. I'm partnering with God to give you everything you need in this category. And so here's another one. I will do my imperfect best to provide for your needs and lead you in life, but you need to know that God can be trusted to fill all your needs, even when I'm gone, including direction to living a life that is deeply fulfilling. That is a very assuring message. And it completes the spectrum of need and the spectrum of who's going to solve what problem. I'm here as long as I can, but this God is out there, and he is here for eternity, and he is the backfill of this relationship. You do not have to have fear about, I'm not going to be here forever, or if over-focus on me as the answer to divine needs. And that's one of the things we want to do as quickly as we can. We want to get off the pedestal, as Beth said, and get God on the pedestal for the big needs in life that we never had a chance to fill because they were always divine.
We're very sensitive, actually, to the fact that engaging God to partner with you in parenting absolutely takes some heart change for parents, because we didn't come into the parent role with, as we said, an owner's manual or exact instructions, and we're all, on the job training. And so a big portion of this means looking at our own hearts and dealing with any wrong understandings that we may have about God. And the ways that those things can manifest can be recognizing that instead of trusting God, I'm doing all kinds of controlling things. I'm trying to control and fix my child and hover over them and tell them for the 14th time about this behavior I want them to stop. And basically, I'm just frantically relying on my own control strategy to try to get the child's behavior to line up. Without realizing it, what I'm doing in that is I'm modeling that I trust my control instead of trusting God. So if that's the case, then we just want to begin to engage with God and ask for help in that. Just acknowledge that, Lord, I've been doing this whole control thing my whole life, and I want to drop that. I'm ready to drop my control, and I need your help to trust you. We also may recognize that we've just got too much dependency on our child's opinion of us. Like we're hesitant to do something that might displease them or run them off. And so we're actually kind of walking on eggshells or pulling back from doing maybe a kind but limiting sort of thing that needs to be done. Or I'm just looking to their successes to make me feel good about myself as a parent or feel good about life. And so if they do something wrong, or certainly if they have a moral failing, or they just don't achieve up to the standards of their capability, then all of that goes into this burden I've got for, or deficit really that I've got for not feeling good about myself because they're not making me feel good about myself. And so it's important to just acknowledge honestly if that's going on and see it as something to engage God in my own life, repent of that, and ask God to fill my needs for value and worth, and not look to my child and their success or lack of success to make me feel good.
So we want to partner with God on this as well. We want to bring him into the conversation, and I think the best way to do that is going to be engage in a prayer that asks him in to help us with these things, to position our hearts so that we can actually partner with him effectively in our parenting. So here's a prayer. If you want to engage God to move your heart as well as to lead you in parenting, and this would be a great prayer for you to follow me through. Heavenly Father, thank you that you love me unconditionally and are perfectly trustworthy to fill my deepest needs. Father, I reject any lie or teaching that is in my heart that opposes that truth. Father, please replace those lies with your truth of your character. Father, I also reject any dependency I have on my child's approval, on their love, or their performance to fill my need for worth or assurance about life that only you can provide. Father, I invite you into my heart to fill my divine needs with healthy dependencies on your presence and your love and your peace. Father, I invite you to partner with me in parenting my child. Thank you that you have the answers that I will never have for my child, but you allow me the gratification of filling those needs for my children by introducing them to you. Father, please give me the insight to understand when my child needs the answer that only knowing and trusting you can provide. Lord, please make the opportunities and give me the words to represent the fullness of your character to my children when they most need it. Father, thank you for accommodating my imperfection by supporting me in parenting with your perfection. I pray this in the name of your child, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for joining us today. We do ask that you share this with anyone who might be blessed by these truths, and certainly feel free to email us or call us if this has touched off something in your heart and you want to know more about what services and counseling and programs there are at Rock House Center. So we thank you, and may God bless you.
Goodbye.